But what really happened to the family? And just how bad was the scene when officers arrived at the home? It was an ordinary day in Colorado. The sun was shining and the birds were tweeting. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. It was a day just like any other, until police officers knocked on the door of a house in Colorado Springs, and what they saw next was straight out of a horror movie. But before we get into the details of this case, let's go back to the beginning and see what led up to this tragic incident. Let's start at the beginning with the victim in this case. His name was Thomas. He was a 46-year-old man who lived alone in his house in Colorado Springs. Thomas had been a suspect in several crimes, including assault and harassment. He also had several active warrants for his arrest. In the years prior to the incident, Thomas had reportedly made threats to the people around him. In fact, he had even threatened the police and swore that he would make them pay if they ever tried to come after him. Just 1 year before the horrifying discovery, Thomas was arrested after threatening a police officer during a traffic stop. He told the officer that he would have him killed and then proceeded to slam the car door on the officer's hand, causing some serious injuries. The trouble didn't end there. Just a few months later, Thomas assaulted his neighbor, leaving her shaken and bruised. The woman claimed that she had been walking home from the grocery store when Thomas started making obscene gestures at her. When she ignored him, he followed her and then attacked her from behind. She was rushed to the hospital where she received treatment for her injuries. Following these incidents, authorities were keeping a close eye on Thomas, waiting for him to slip up so they could finally take him off the streets. They knew that he was a threat to the public, and they wanted to protect everyone in the community. So now let's fast forward to the day that everything changed. A welfare check was requested by a concerned citizen who was worried about Thomas's well-being. They had noticed that the blinds of his house had been closed for several days, and they couldn't remember the last time they saw him outside. The person assumed that something might be wrong and decided to call the police. Officers were dispatched to Thomas's house to conduct a welfare check. But little did they know that they were about to witness one of the most horrific scenes that any cop can ever imagine. As they approached the house, they noticed that the front door was slightly ajar, which was unusual because Thomas always kept it locked. Their curiosity piqued, and they slowly opened the door and stepped inside. What they saw was beyond their wildest imaginations. The sight that greeted them was so shocking that they immediately called for backup. What had the concerned citizen seen that prompted them to call the police in the first place? What did the officers see when they entered the house? And how did the investigation unfold? Let's find out. When the police entered the house, they found something so disturbing that they were left speechless. The sight that met their eyes was a scene straight out of a nightmare. They had expected to find a man in need of assistance, but instead they were confronted with a horrifying tableau. Thomas's body was lying on the floor in a state of advanced decomposition, indicating that he had been dead for quite some time. But that was only the beginning of the grim discovery. As they continued to investigate, they found the bodies of his two sons, 19-year-old Nicholas and 18-year-old Christopher, also deceased and in various stages of decomposition. The stench was so bad that the officers had to hold their breath. As they carefully examined the scene, the condition of the bodies suggested that they had been dead for several days, adding to the eerie atmosphere of the crime scene. The question that was now on everyone's mind was, how did they die? And who was responsible for such a horrific crime? Was this a case of murder, or was there another explanation for their deaths? As the investigation began, more clues emerged, painting a grim picture of the events that transpired in the house. The police were still trying to understand what had happened to the family. The initial assumption was that this was a case of murder, but they needed more evidence to confirm their suspicions. They started by interviewing the neighbors and friends of the family to try to piece together the events leading up to the horrifying discovery. During their investigation, the police uncovered some disturbing information about Thomas. They learned that he had been involved in illegal activities for many years. In fact, he was known to deal drugs and had been involved in several shady dealings in the past. This information led the police to believe that Thomas's death may have been drug-related. As the investigation progressed, the police also discovered that Thomas had recently received a large sum of money, which made him a potential target for robbery. This theory was further supported by the fact that there were signs of a struggle in the house, suggesting that there may have been a fight before the murders took place. But despite the progress they were making, the police were still puzzled by one important detail. Who could have committed such a brutal crime and why? The killer had not only taken the lives of Thomas and his two sons, but they had also left their bodies in the house for days, causing them to decompose. This behavior was not consistent with that of a typical murderer. The tight-knit community of Colorado Springs was shocked. and saddened by the news of the horrific crime that had been committed in their midst. The senseless loss of life and the brutality of the murders sent shockwaves through the town. Residents expressed their condolences to the family and friends of the victims, and many called for justice to be served. The local authorities responded to the tragedy by offering a reward for any information that could help solve the case. They also increased patrols in the area to ensure the safety and security of the residents. The community came together in the face of adversity, organizing vigils and memorials to honor the memory of Thomas and his sons. As the investigation continued, the media played a significant role in keeping the public informed about the progress of the case. However, some criticized the media for sensationalizing the story and invading the privacy of the victims' families. Despite the criticism, the media's coverage helped to keep the case in the public's eye and put pressure on the authorities to solve the crime. But as time passed without any significant leads, the hope of finding the killer began to fade. The community was left grappling with the tragedy and wondering whether justice would ever be served. Now let's talk about the people who are behind this horrendous crime. According to the available information, no arrests have been made in connection with the case, and the police are still looking for the person or persons responsible for the crime. The investigation is ongoing, and the police are following up on all leads to try to bring the killer to justice. They are asking anyone with any information about the case to come forward and share what they know. The police are particularly interested in speaking to anyone who may have seen or heard anything suspicious in the days leading up to the discovery of the bodies. Despite the passage of time, the police are hopeful that they will eventually catch up with the killer and bring them to justice. They are committed to solving the case and providing closure to the family and friends of the victims. Now let's discuss the dark theories surrounding this terrifying event. Some people believe that Thomas's illegal activities caught up with him and his son, and that they were targeted by a rival drug dealer or an individual who had a grudge against him. Others believe that the murders were committed by a stranger who had no connection to Thomas and his sons, but who simply chose their house to commit the crime. There are also those who believe that the crime was committed by someone close to the family, such as a friend or an acquaintance who had access to their home and knew their routine. The police have not ruled out any possibility and are investigating all angles to try to determine the motive behind the murders and identify the killer. While the investigation continues, the community is left to grapple with the tragedy and wonder why such a horrific crime could have been committed. The senseless loss of life and the brutality of the murders have shaken the community to its core, and many are still searching for answers. What are your thoughts on this case? What do you think happened to the family? We would love to hear your opinion in the comments below. And if you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe and leave us a like. Thanks for watching. We've reached the end of this gripping narrative, but the story doesn't end here. If you want to continue exploring similar cases, we invite you to stay tuned for more content. Also, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the case. What do you think happened to the family? Share your theories and opinions in the comments below. Your engagement helps us create more compelling content for you. Thanks for watching.